All right, let's jump right into it. We are looking at the absolute centerpiece of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, Act 3, Scene 1. This is it. This is where all that simmering tension from the first two acts finally just boils over. The entire fate of the Roman Republic literally pivots on a few brutal seconds. We're going to break down exactly how this goes down in this explainer, hitting all the crucial beats and unforgettable lines of this masterpiece.
To get a grip on this incredible sequence of suspense and psychological warfare, we'll quickly move through 5 key moments. First, the omens and ignored warnings. Then, the northern star falls, followed by bathing in Caesar's blood, Antony's calculated handshake, and we'll wrap up with a prophecy of doom.
Section 1. Omens and Ignored Warnings. So, our scene kicks off in the incredibly tense streets of Rome, right on the Ides of March. Caesar is immediately confronted by the soothsayer and Artemidorus. You probably remember the soothsayer warned Caesar about this exact day earlier. As Caesar struts toward the capital, he actually taunts the guy, saying, "The Ides of March are come." But the soothsayer just chillingly shoots back, "I, Caesar, but not gone."
And right here, we see Caesar's fatal flaw perfectly exposed. He completely prioritizes his invincible public persona over his very real, very mortal personal safety. Artemidorus is practically begging Caesar to read a letter that literally spells out the entire assassination plot. But what does Caesar do? He brushes him off, saying, "What touches us ourselves shall be last served." It's like he believes his public image is so bulletproof, or, well, dagger-proof, that his actual physical body can't be touched. He dismisses the guy as a total madman and just walks right into the trap.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Northern Star Falls. Inside the capital, the conspirators have this whole strategy worked out. They surround Caesar, pretending to plead for a banished citizen. It's a total setup. Trebonius carefully distracts Mark Antony and pulls him out of the room, so Caesar is completely isolated. Then Metellus Cimber drops to his knees, begging for his banished brother Publius.
Now listen to the absolute hubris in Caesar's response here, just moments before his death. He compares himself to an immovable divine force. He's literally calling himself the Northern Star. When the guys are kneeling and begging him to change his mind, he tells them their fawning might sway regular fools, but not him. He claims he's totally beyond questioning, basically comparing himself to Mountain Olympus. This staggering, godlike arrogance, that is exactly the justification the conspirators need to finally unsheath those knives.
And from that peak of arrogance, the whole thing devolves into a rapid-fire, ticking clock sequence of pure chaos. We are talking mere seconds here. Metellus begs. Caesar bluntly refuses, basically telling him to get out of his face or he'll kick him like a stray dog. Then Casca just yells, "Speak, hands, for me," and strikes the first blow. The rest of them immediately jump in. It's a total frenzy of violence that ultimately ends with Brutus stepping up to deliver the final strike.
And then we get Caesar's heartbreaking final words. He only really gives up when he sees his incredibly close friend Brutus holding a dagger. It is a brilliant move by Shakespeare to keep this famous phrase in its original Latin, et tu, Brute. And you, Brutus? The devastation here is just profound. Caesar completely stops defending himself the second he realizes his best friend is in on this massive betrayal. He just accepts it and falls.
All right, Section 3. Bathing in Caesar's blood. So tyranny is declared dead, the senators are literally scattering in absolute terror, and the conspirators suddenly realize they need to justify this horrific thing they just did. The whole place erupts into complete pandemonium. You've got Cinna screaming, "Liberty, freedom, tyranny is dead," while everyday citizens and politicians are running through the streets like the world is actually ending.
Which forces us to ask a massive question. With the so-called tyrant dead, who is actually running Rome now? Talk about your ultimate power vacuum. The conspirators are desperately trying to calm the panicked crowd, yelling that ambition's debt is paid and that they aren't going to hurt anybody else. But honestly, right now, they're just a bunch of guys standing completely exposed in the middle of the Senate, looking down at the bloody corpse of Rome's undisputed leader. And this is where Brutus tries to use this totally detached, stoic logic to rationalize the murder. He tries to frame the assassination not as a crime, but, actually scratch that, as a bizarre favor to Caesar. Cassius points out that whoever cuts off 20 years of life just cuts off 20 years of having to fear death. And Brutus actually agrees. He calls death a benefit, arguing that killing Caesar makes them his true friends. It is such a twisted, almost laughable rationalization, but it perfectly shows how dangerously abstract and trapped in his own head Brutus really is. What they do next is just shocking. It's this incredibly gruesome, almost cult-like ritual.
Brutus tells everyone to get down and literally bathe their hands up to their elbows in Caesar's blood and smear it all over their swords. Cassius even proudly predicts that this lofty scene is going to be reenacted in unborn countries and unknown languages forever. They seriously 100% believe they are the noble saviors of the Roman Republic right now, not just common street butchers. Moving on to Section 4, Antony's calculated handshake. Here, the tension abruptly shifts gears completely from physical stabbing to intense psychological warfare. Mark Antony, Caesar's fiercely loyal right-hand man, bravely shows up. At first, he'd run home in shock, but he sends a servant ahead to kind of test the waters. Brutus, being totally blinded by his own sense of honor, promises Antony will be perfectly safe.
Antony walks in and pulls off a brilliant duel strategy. On the surface, he's acting like this appeasing, grieving friend, but underneath, he is secretly plotting to obliterate every single one of them. He sees Caesar's body and immediately offers his own chest to their swords. When Brutus insists they only killed Caesar out of pity for Rome, Antony goes around and shakes every single one of their blood-soaked hands. But make no mistake, this is not submission. He is literally marking the guilty. He's smearing himself with his best friend's blood just to buy time, quietly keeping a deadly ledger of his new enemies.
This interaction perfectly highlights the massive internal rift tearing the assassins apart. You've got Brutus's naive idealism directly clashing with Cassius's shrewd, cutthroat political instincts. See, Antony asks if he can take Caesar's body to the marketplace and give a funeral speech. Cassius immediately pulls Brutus aside, frantically whispering, "You know not what you do." He knows exactly how easily crowds are manipulated by emotion, but Brutus, he firmly believes that because his motives were noble, the public will totally respect him for letting Caesar's body speak.
So, firmly believing he holds the absolute moral high ground, Brutus lays down these strict ground rules for Antony's speech. He tells him, "You can say all the good you want about Caesar, but you cannot blame us, and you have to explicitly tell the crowd you're speaking by our permission." Brutus wildly overestimates his own control here and completely underestimates his opponent. He thinks these constraints will make the assassins look generous. Antony just calmly replies, "Be it so. I do desire no more."
Which leads us straight into our final section, a prophecy of doom. The conspirators head out to face the public, and Antony is finally left completely alone with Caesar's corpse. And the second the door closes, all that polite diplomacy completely vanishes. The mask comes off.
He delivers this absolutely chilling soliloquy, literally begging Caesar's corpse for forgiveness for playing nice with the very men who just murdered him. He calls Caesar the ruins of the noblest man that ever lived in the tide of times. And as he stares at Caesar's stab wounds, which he vividly describes as dumb mouths opening their ruby lips to beg him to speak, he makes a terrifying promise.
He predicts that Rome is going to be consumed by a fierce, apocalyptic civil war as direct payback for this foul deed. We aren't just talking about a little political unrest here. Antony foresees a conflict so shocking and bloody that domestic fury will blanket all of Italy. He says blood and destruction will become so common that mothers will literally just smile when they see their babies torn to pieces by war, because all normal human compassion will be choked out by everyday violence. Caesar's ghost, roaming with the goddess of strife, is going to rise from hell itself, crying havoc and letting slip the dogs of war.
Literally, right as Antony finishes this terrifying vision, a servant of young Octavius Caesar walks in. Antony tells him Rome isn't safe for Octavius just yet, and tells the servant to stick around and see how the Roman public reacts to his upcoming funeral oration. You see, Brutus really thinks the assassination is the end of the story, but Antony, he is just getting started. So will a single, carefully chosen speech be enough to tear the entire Roman Republic to the ground? We'll leave you with that to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.